Yeah, I'm on. I can hear my echo. Well. Where are my Cubs fans at today? Yeah. Where are my Cardinals fans at, though? Yes, that's what I like to hear. So, I just want to say one short thing about that. Cubs, I hope you enjoyed your ride because the Cardinals are back in the playoffs. It was insane, right? 17 wins in a row. I'm a sports fan, I'm a baseball fan, so I'm going to talk about it for a little bit because I can. And you guys have to listen because you're there. Unless those Cubs fans back there are like, no. No, it's been cool. Like, I'm a baseball guy, I grew up baseball. Watching that was amazing. Watching 17 wins in a row, the most wins in a streak in the last 50 years in the National League was insane to watch and to see it go through. And so, the Metro East is totally pro-Cardinals for the most part. And so there's going to be a handful of people throughout our church doing watch parties on Wednesday for that wild card game. And so if you guys are wanting to get connected, I know the college ministry, we're going to be at my house. I know Max has talked to Reggie or something like that. So if you're an adult, talk to Max. If you're a college kid, come talk to me. We'll make sure that you guys find somewhere to watch that with a bunch of group of people. I still remember when the Cardinals won the World Series in 2011. I was at a campus ministry event, and it was just crazy because a couple of the guys, once that last out was caught, people started running up and down the streets like crazy. It was the coolest thing to see. But games like that, big games like that, cool games like that, it's not as fun to watch alone. It's always fun to have a group of people around you. So if you guys are planning on watching that game, talk to somebody. We'll make sure that you guys get connected. It's going to be a good game. It gives me a good excuse to wear a jersey today, too, instead of like a polo. So we're in a new sermon series called If Animals Could Talk. All right? And when I found out about this sermon series, I was like, what in the world are we going to do with this? I had no idea what the plan was. I had no idea how we were going to connect it. Because I think of if animals could talk, I don't tend to think of like how they would like help us in the Bible. I watch a lot of, how many of you guys have ever watched like those voiceover animal videos, whether it be like on TikTok or Snapchat or YouTube or things like that? This is what I think would happen if animals could actually talk. Go ahead and play that video real quick.
How come y'all ain't tell me y'all having the cookout? I was in the neighborhood. How's everybody doing, man? Y'all good? Y'all good? Hey, how's Sally doing? She was, okay, all right. Let me just dip my paw in here. You know what I'm saying? See what y'all got going. Oh man, see now you done hit the food pay dirt, as they say. When you dip your hand in the water, get that moisture on it. Oh, this is so good, man. Y'all don't be doing this? Oh, come on. Oh, you just grab some, you grab a handful, you dip it in the water. You see, get in on this, man. Come on, man. Try a little bit. You taste it. Okay, all right. Y'all a little uptight, but that's what these cookouts are for. You feel me? But listen, I gotta get on out of here, guys. Oh, thank you. I gotta get on out of here, man. But you know what, man? I'm gonna be in this traffic on the way back home, man. I don't want to get hungry on the freeway. Let me just grab something to go and then tip on out. Y'all be good. Praise God, man.
Sell online and grow your business.
Man, they would just have personalities just like we do in a lot of different things. So when I found out that we were talking about animals, I was like, man, there's so many different animals in the Bible, right? There's so many different things and so many different creatures, like a lion, like the Lion of Judah. Like, that'd be a great one to talk about. Or, just different things, like the type of animals that maybe were around Jesus when he was born. And I was like, Jake, you're talking about a goose. And I was like, man, could I do like a lion? Or could I do like a cool animal? Because geese, there's nothing special about geese to me. And honestly, if you've been a student at SIUE, man, we can't stand geese, right? They're the worst. How many of you guys cannot stand geese when you see them on campus, right? It's like they know that we can't do anything to them, right? They just walk around with their little attitudes and they poop on our walkways, and then it's like they trap us because they poop on the walkways, and then they want to attack you, but you got to run through their little poop minefield to get away from them. But I know they know what they're doing because they know that we're not allowed to mess with them. So there's something smart about these geese that we got to learn from today, right? It may not be the geese at SIUE because those guys are annoying, but there's geese in general that I think we can learn some things from. And this idea of talking about geese and just animals in general, why would we talk about if animals could talk. Well, there's a story in Job, right? And we know the story of Job, and some of you guys know the story of how God allowed Satan to test Job. And so Satan starts doing a lot of different things to Job and starts just showing certain things in his life. And his family and friends start circling around him and saying, listen, like, you need to look at what's going on. Like, this is terrible stuff. This is bad stuff. You need to look what's happening in your relationship with God. Like, maybe he's mad at you. Maybe he's upset with you, whatever it may be. And they're like, just, look at what's going on. And this is Job's response to them. He says in Job 12, verses 7 through 8, this is your theme verse at the top of your notes. It says, just ask the animals, and they would teach you. Ask the birds of the sky, and they will tell you. Speak to the earth, and it will instruct you. Let the fish and the sea speak to you. And what he's saying is, essentially, the animals inherently don't have these same issues that we do as humans. Yet God created animals. God created nature. And so we believe that looking at what happened with Job and how he responds to these people, like, listen just to the way that the world around you has been created, because they're not struggling with the issues that you're even struggling with. That I think that we can find some things through different animals and then in their nature, what God created them to be, that there is life lessons that we can learn as well. And so what we've done is, we're going to kind of pick through different animals. And so today we're going to talk about a goose. And it's kind of a silly animal to be named, a silly animal to talk about. But there are some things inherently inside of geese, in their nature, that they are just wired to do. And there's great parallels that we can learn from geese in how we choose to live our lives as disciples. And back in the day, I'm not this old, but some of you guys may be if you know this phrase, but there was a phrase that whenever people would kind of get in trouble or somebody would do something that was kind of obnoxious, they would say, you ain't got the good sense God gave a goose. Right? Anybody know that phrase or heard that phrase before? You ain't got the sense God gave a goose? Some of you guys are too scared to raise your hands. I know you are. Right? And so I didn't really know what that meant. I just kind of meant it meant you had no sense. So I looked it up, and in this blog from Southern Love, a lifestyle, it says, in the South, we have a Southern saying that says, you ain't got the good sense God gave a goose. When somebody says this to you, it's a nice Southern way of calling you dumb or stupid. And so, essentially, whenever somebody say that to somebody, say, hey, you ain't got the good sense God gave a goose. That means that there is something inherently about geese that's somewhat intelligent, and that we are not doing that. And so what we're going to look at is, today we want to look at different things, different senses that God gave geese. Different things that God had inherently put inside of them that they are wired to do as soon as they're born, how they flock together, how they migrate together, how they function as a team. What are the things that God had wired in them that we can learn and look at our lives and how we choose to wire ourselves as disciples, being connected to a church, being connected to one another, or just even a person in the world? What is it that we need to learn from that? And so we're going to look at 4 different things today. So God knows that you and I need to have a sense of unity. The first one is a sense of unity. And this idea of being a sense of unity is choosing to agree. A sense of unity means I choose to agree. You see, geese flock together because they have a common purpose. They all have the same idea. That's why you don't see a bunch of geese scattered around hanging out with different types of birds. They only join flocks going in the right direction, the same direction as them. And there's different types of geese in the world. If you guys would ever go to like a bird sanctuary, you guys would look these things up. There's geese that migrate north, there's geese that migrate south, there's geese that migrate all over the place. And there's different breeds and types of geese. And if you were ever to go to even a bird sanctuary where there's different types and different breeds of geese within that sanctuary, you would see that the different types of geese still flock within their own groups. They don't all flock just because they're called a goose, that they flock with all other gooses or geese. I'm gonna mess that up a lot today. But they tend to find the common ground of what they are. You've heard the cliche, birds of a feather flock together, right? And that's essentially the same thing that goes for geese. That when they choose to find somebody with a common purpose and a common goal, that's who they tend to flock with. Look at this in Amos 3:3. It says, is it possible for two to go walking together, if not by agreement? And essentially what this is saying and what this means is you can't be forced to go somewhere you're not wanting to go. You can't walk in a direction that you don't want to go in. And just like geese, they know that this is the direction they want to go in, and so they find the unity because this is their goal in life. And just like Amos is saying, that we have to find a unity, and we have to make sure we're going in the right direction. And we can't flock with a group of people and say we don't want to go in that direction and go in the direction that we want to go in. It doesn't make any sense. We have to make sure that we're on the same page and that we're going in the same direction. We're going to flock with that. And what that means is, essentially, whoever you choose to flock with is where you're going to go. That's what Amos is trying to get us to understand. That whoever you choose to spend your time with, whoever you choose to invest with, just like a goose, when you see them in a flock, you know where they're going. And I would challenge you guys today that whoever you choose to associate with, whoever you choose in life to unite with, that's as far as you're going to go, as wherever that flock is going to lead you to. And so many times we, as Christians or even as just people in the world looking around for a unity, a team, a support group of people to be around us, we tend to find the wrong groups of people. We tend to flock with the wrong types of flocks. And we see where our life is going because of the people that we surround ourselves with. And churches do the same thing. In a church, a lot of times, you don't see unity. You see division. You see confrontations that are not healthy. You see people that don't like one another. You don't see a clear, united purpose in churches. And that's why I believe more times than not, churches are closing their doors day after day after day. Every day in America, there's a church that shuts down. Every day. Some days there's more than one. The national average of how many churches shut down on a year is higher than the days in a year. There's a church, this is back in 1963, this University Christian Church in New York, put a sign on their door when they closed down. It said, "Gone out of business. Didn't really know what our business was." And that's so true in the churches today, right? That they don't understand where they should be going, so everyone has their own agendas on what they think the church should be or what the church should be or needs to be healthy. And so there's not a sense of unity in what they're choosing to do with one another, and so it tends to become a division. Look at this in Luke 11, verse 17. It says, "Any country that divides itself into groups which fight each other will not last very long." Isn't that true today for our culture, where we're at in our world today? A family divided against itself falls apart. You see, there's two different types of groups that he's talking about here. There's groups in the world, right? And if we look at our country right now, that's very true. There are so many things that divide us, whether it be racial, whether it be political, whether it be financial, whether it be social. All these different areas in our world, we're starting to form teams and groups and separation, and we're fighting against each other in this nation, and it's never going to stand. But then it goes on and it makes it more specific and more intimate when it says a family divided against itself falls apart. And I think that's so true when we talk about churches, when we talk about the unity of what we have in the family of believers, the family of God, that the same thing can happen. You see, we don't choose to find unity as a whole within our church. We almost ultimately end up looking like a bunch of different cliques at a lunch table in high school, where there's a handful of us that are athletes, so we have our little group. We have a handful of us that, the worship team, and they have their own little ministry, and they stick to themselves. Or we have, the college kids, they think that they're just the coolest of the bunch, and so they don't need to expand out and talk to anybody else. And we find these little cliques and these little groups, and if you go visit churches around America, you're going to see a lot of those, They're untouchable, they're unreachable. They have their own agenda. They're just kind of here because of the social aspect, but they don't have the same united front. And just like the flock, we're not going to be able to get as far as we're supposed to or get as much accomplished as we need to when we don't realize that we need that unity. It says in Genesis 11, verses 6, it says, "Look," he said, "the people are united, and they all speak the same language. After this, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them." You see, it's talking about the Tower of Babel here. If you guys have ever heard the Tower of Babel, it's one of the childhood, stories that you instill in the children's ministry. But essentially, the Tower of Babel was in the Old Testament, and God's people got together and they started to build a tower. Now, it doesn't tell us their motive and why they built this tower, but they wanted to build a tower to reach God. And God comes in and says, "This is not a good thing." He says, "I don't want this to happen." And so he ends up crushing it down and changing their languages so they can't hear each other. They don't understand what each other's saying. They start babbling, hence the Tower of Babel. But even in the midst of something that God did not want to happen, it is undeniable for God to understand that nothing's impossible when people are united. Even when they were doing something that God did not want them to do. He literally says, nothing that they set out to do will be impossible. So if people that don't want to do what God wants done can do anything, what in the world do you think God would do with his disciples if they would do the things on the same page? What do you think we could accomplish as a church if we were united in the way that the people in Babel were? If we had the same purpose, the same unity, the same vision, the same support, what do you think we could accomplish as a church? What kind of community could we reach out to here in Collinsville, here on SIU's campus, the surrounding Metro East area? The things that we could be capable of are tremendous. But we have to find unity. We have to surround ourselves with the same flock to have the same vision. So there's a sense of unity. The second point is a sense of synergy. We have to have a sense of synergy. And where a sense of unity is to find people with the common purpose, a sense of synergy is working to assimilate. And essentially what that means is that we are working towards a common goal. So it's not just enough to find the group that you want to associate with, but you also have to put the work in once you're in that group to achieve the same goal. You have to have to work to assimilate towards the same goal. And with a goose, that synergy starts with literally flapping their wings. You know, if you ever seen like a goose on the ground, right, and they kind of get upset and they start, sticking their wings out like that and they start kind of wobbling after you, they don't look very comfortable, do they? Like they look very, very awkward. And I'm like, this is a stupid goose coming after me right now. But it's so funny because we all freak out when they come after us, right? Whenever it's like that close to our face. But like we know that it's so awkward in the way that it walks and its long neck and its wings are all over the place. It's just not evenly proportioned for like a living creature, the way that it creates itself. So how much harder is it for it whenever it starts to fly? Think about how big a goose's body is to keep that thing hovered in the air, right? But for synergy for geese, it literally involves just flapping their wings, because there's no way when they choose to migrate, if they live here today and they're migrating to the south, there's no way for them to get from here to there without flapping their wings. They can try to walk, but you've seen a goose walk, right? They ain't going to make it very far. And so for geese, they have to use their wings. They have to flap. And it's just, when you think about synergy involving flapping wings, think about exertion, think about work. It's a physical thing that has to be done. Because flapping their wings creates uplift, and it helps those behind them. So where's the parallel here for us? Well, if there's anything we want to achieve in this world, we're going to have to work for it. I kind of came between a weird generation, right? I feel like I'm an old soul at heart. I feel like I'm like me and Reggie Conley, like I feel like we're like brothers, more than just in the church. Like I love sitting down and talking with like Reggie and June, and I didn't want to say June, I meant John. But you're both married, so, John's not, robbing the cradle there. That's the same age there. But Reggie and John and some of these older guys, I love sitting in those circles. I'm like, this feels nice. I feel at home. Like I feel like we have common, and I feel like I'm an old soul, right? And a lot of times what I hear in those conversations is, man, this young generation, they don't know how to work. Like they feel like everything's been given to them. They feel like they're entitled to every little thing in this earth. And I'm like, yeah, they do. And then I remember I'm one of them. Like I'm in that same group. But I feel that way. Like I'm like, man, this new generation is so entitled. They feel like they ain't got to do nothing. They feel like everything should be given to them. They feel like if they were a goose, somebody would carry them all the way to the south to make sure they stayed warm for the summer, right? They don't need to do anything. Somebody else should do everything for them. And I've seen both worlds of that. And just like these geese understand that there's work that needs to be done, we need to understand, our church is a really young church if you guys haven't looked around, right? I'd say 70% of our church is the age of 30 or younger. And that's a young church. That's not something that's very familiar in churches in America today. And so if I'm speaking to 70% of you guys, I want you guys to know if there's anything that God wants to do awesome in your guys' life, you're going to have to freaking work for it. You're going to have to do something about it. You're not just going to be able to wait around and let your parents do everything for you. You're not going to have a great life because your parents have a great life for you. But you're going to have to work for those things. If you want a good marriage one day, you're going to have to work in that marriage and work for that marriage. If you want a good job one day, you're going to have to work your butt off to make sure that you get that job or you get the credentials to be able to achieve that job. And it's no different in your relationship with God. If you want a good relationship with God, you've got to work for it with him. You can't just sit around and think that God's like Santa Claus and he's going to give you everything. But you've got to work in that relationship. And just like geese, we have to understand that there's some work that's going to have to be done. So synergy involves flapping wings, but also synergy involves falling in line. And when we think about falling in line, think about submission. You know, once again, young generation, we don't like that word. That's not a fun word to talk about, submission. But when you see it in the lives of a goose can fly. I did some research, really weird if you check my Google history this week. But a goose can fly a little over 500 miles by themselves. That's like from here to like Atlanta or so. So they can fly from point A to point B by themselves 500 miles. But when they fall in line, and if you've ever seen geese, they fly in a V formation, right? A goose can fly up to 850 miles in that formation. So they can fly over 350 miles more together than alone. That V formation increases the flying range of each bird by 71%. That's what that math comes out to. So a goose can go about 71% further than they would be able to alone when they choose to fall in line in a V formation. Now, once again, if a goose chooses to fly by themselves, they don't get to feel that uplift, that momentum, or that V formation is something that's inherently in them because it creates a draft and an upwind for them to be able to kind of soar and coast from time to time so they don't get as tired. But if you're not in that line, you will tend to feel drag, and you won't get the benefits of that group. What's the parallel here, guys? Well, when we don't have submission, when we don't fall in line, when we choose not to form a team and work towards the common goal, we're going to be a drag. We're going to be a drag on ourselves, so we're going to work harder than we need to, and we're going to get tired out. But we're also going to affect the others around us because essentially that V formation will not go as far as it's intended to go if not everybody's on that same page as a goose. So what's that look like in ministry? Well, if we're not choosing to fall in line and work together towards the common goal, we're not going to get as far as God wants us to. I think God has great plans for this church. I think God has awesome plans for this church. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't raise my family in this church. I wouldn't choose to invest my life in this church. I wouldn't choose to live, I wouldn't live in Illinois for sure. This is not the greatest state in America by any means, But I truly believe that God is doing great things in this church. I truly believe that God is wanting to do amazing things, and God has provided a home, a safe place that I trust my life, my wife's life, and my kids' lives and their salvations by what's going on in this church. And if I didn't, I wouldn't be here. But it can't just be me and my family choosing to make those decisions as we fly out in this formation. Because what makes a church a great church is that everyone puts a hand in and everyone has the same goal and everyone works together to bear the burdens of one another in this church. And so there's this idea that we have to submit to a team. We have to have that common role. And synergy also involves fulfilling a role. Knowing that there is a role, but synergy involves fulfilling a role. And when you think about that, you think about cooperation. So in that V formation, right, there is no leader. When you look at it from like a perspective, like if you're looking up in the sky, you obviously see that there's one goose that's in front, right? And people that wouldn't know or would just see it, from a bird's eye view would look up and say, all right, that's the leader, right? But what you don't see is you don't see the 800 miles that they're flying. Because what tends to happen is that front goose leaves that position because they get tired. And what will happen is when that front goose chooses to drop out, they will drop out and they will go towards the back and they will coast to recharge and get energy, and another goose will come up and take its place so that it can keep going. And they will rotate positions for the good of the common purpose for them to make sure they keep going in the same direction. It doesn't matter how exhausted they are, but they never quit. That V formation never drops down and just sits and just gives up. but they always keep going. But they all understand that there's not a leader that's in charge of everything. And that's so important. I feel this parallel because of the position that I have in this church. But guys, let me read the stat. It says, in the average United States, church research reveals that approximately 80% of the work and the giving in the church is given by only 20% of the congregation. That's a national average. That 80% of the work and giving is done by 20% of the church. So the result is that only 20% of what that church could actually achieve is being achieved. But then also only 20% of the church is actually really getting exhausted from the work that's being done. You see, just like geese, if that one guy on front, that one goose that is in the front of the V, if he chose to stay there the whole time and he got no help, they would not get very far. And the same thing can be said about churches, guys. If you just expect and depend the leadership to run everything, well, say in this church, for example, here at the Crossings, I would say probably about 20% of our church's leadership. Then that means that we're only going to get as far as 20% of the people in this room want us to go. If we expect that out of our leaders to say, well, I'm just here to reap the benefits. I'm here in the back to kind of soar, and this is nice, and I'm getting where I want to go. I want to go to heaven one day, so I'm just going to kind of chill in the back, and you guys can do all the heavy flapping. I'm just going to kind of, coast on your coattails. That V formation is not going to get to their destination. And the same thing within a church. If that's our goal, to expand and reach a hurt and lost world, and we expect 20% of the congregation to just do that, we're never going to get where we need to get as a church. The mission and the place that we're going together, we're never going to be able to achieve those things. But we have to understand that every single person has a role. That maybe there's positional leaders within a church, but there's no hierarchy of responsibility in the church. We're all called at the common ground to be a disciple. We're all called at our core, we are all called by God to do the same exact thing. But yet, for some reason, we believe that only 20% should be doing more. You see, it says in Ephesians 4:16, it says, He makes the whole body fit together perfectly. As each part does its own special work, it helps other parts grow so the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. You see, we do need to recognize that there are different parts of the church. There are different ministries. Even here at the Crossings, we've established different ministries for a reason, so that people can find more common ground, find more help quicker, just to find things that they can struggle with, that they can partner with other people to help with those areas. And we'll kind of talk about that later. But just because you're a different part of the body does not mean that you're not responsible for the rest of the body as well. One of the things that I've seen in the past, even within our churches, but churches in general, is it's like once a person transfers from a ministry to another ministry, it's like they've completely forgotten about the other ministries. Or once they, like a college guy or girl, for example, like once a college student graduates and they move up to the adult ministry, it's like they've lost everything that they've remembered about campus ministry, and they're so focused on what ministry they're in place. And so many churches do that. They start to form cliques like I talked about earlier, and they don't choose to help out one another to keep the unity going. Because as ministries, we maybe have different tacks on how we choose to find people and how we choose to love people and how we choose to encourage people. But as a church, we still have the same ultimate goal. And we have to make sure that we look at our lives and we look at how we're choosing to help each people and handle each people so that those things can happen. I started doing something the last couple of weeks at my house. I do a Monday night football thing at my house for any of the guys that just want to come out. If there are any girls out here that like football, you're more than welcome to come too. But I tend to not find a lot of women in my house on Monday nights, So I started opening up my house for Monday nights for football. And, I'm a campus minister. I'm not usually the preacher up here. I work with our college students. And so I do a lot of things with our college students. But, I said, this might be a good night to invite all the men in the church, not just the college guys. And the reason I did that was because I remember whenever I was a younger guy in a church a long time ago, I did not feel connected to the adult men. And if I did, it was because I had to go out of my way to go find them. And there was a connection with me and older men, but there wasn't a connection with me and men a couple years older than me. Guys that just got married, guys that were just starting their jobs. I couldn't find anybody like that. I was just a college kid. And so I had a lot of connections with guys that were like dads to me, but I didn't have a lot of connections with guys that were supposed to be like older brothers to me. And I hated that feeling. And I look at my life now and I'm like, you know what? I probably need to keep this night open, and I want to have the younger adults, and I want to have, you know, the campus men. And if there are any other men that would want to come to that situation, they can. But I think it's good so everyone understands that we're on the same page, that we're on the same team, that there are college guys coming around in our ministries right now that can greatly and deeply benefit from some of our younger adult men because they came through the college ministry. And there's some of our men, honestly and frankly, in our adult ministry that you guys probably need to see what it looks like to actually be active again because you guys have gotten old and died out. It is. It's a funny thing to say, but it's not. Because that's what happens, right? The older you get, the more burnout you get in life, the less ministry you want to do, the more you expect the younger generation to raise up and do your old job. You think it's not your job anymore. And so our fire burns out and our flame goes dead. But when you see the younger generation actually doing it and you get yourself involved with them, it reminds you. You remember those things. And you're like, I remember what it was like to be in the dorms. I remember what it was like to be a crazy fool, you know, every night of the week. Maybe I don't do those things now, but like I definitely can do more than what I was doing or what I am doing. And we find a way to understand that we're all on the same page and we're all working together. But we have to do that by cooperating with one another. You know, in Exodus, Moses is kind of seen as a leader and with God's people. And this is what happens with Moses in a situation that he was tending to almost get burnt out. It says in Exodus 18, it says, the next day Moses took his place to judge the people. People were standing before him all day long, from morning to night. When Moses' father-in-law saw that he was doing this for the people, so once again, Moses didn't have a selfish intent to do this because he's a leader, but he was doing this to help the people. He said, what's going on here? Why are you doing all this and all by yourself, letting everyone line up before you from morning to night? Neighbor and teach them God's laws and instructions, Moses' father-in-law said. This is no way to go about it. You'll burn out. This is way too much for you. You can't do this alone. You see, whenever he talks about ruling these sheep, or not, I'm on a different, sorry, my thing skipped. But essentially what he's saying here is, if we don't help out one another, if that head goose drops out and nobody takes its place, that formation is not going to get where it needs to go. And the same thing here. As we grow as a church, as we build as a church, we cannot expect the same 20% to run everything. We need people to step up. We need people to understand their roles. We need people to mature. We need people to help the next generation. And the older you get, the more experience you have and the more that's needed of you. And so we have to make sure that we're doing this idea and having this job that we know that we're all working together. Sense of energy, synergy. The third point is a sense of empathy. I pause to assist. A sense of empathy. Now, I don't empathize with geese at all. Like I said, up at SIUE, I kind of despise them. They're not my friends on campus. I've seen them as my enemy at times. It's kind of funny. So whenever I was a college student, there was one time whenever I was living in Cougar Village, and there's a bunch of geese that would literally it's like they camped out right outside of our Cougar Village apartment, and they would honk like crazy in the mornings. And my roommate and I literally were conspiring a way to kill these geese and not have the university find out. Because we lived all the way back in the back corner. And there was no apartments near us. We were right next to the woods. We're like, literally, if we just went out there and just shot them up and threw them in the woods, nobody would know. Nobody would know, right? People would actually probably congratulate us. They would probably say, thanks, guys. Like, where did all those geese go? And we were right next to the trash can, so maybe we could just dump them all in the trash can, like the giant trash bin. Like, nobody would know. And and you guys, I hear some of you guys, some of you PETA people out there being like, oh, they're little animals. They're not, all right? They have an agenda, and you guys just don't know about it, right? I do not empathize with geese. But geese empathize with each other. And I never knew this until I looked this up. But whenever they're flying in that V formation, wherever they're at, when a goose gets sick or injured or even shot down by a hunter, 2 other geese will fly down as well. Unless there's a predator or a human too far nearby that would scare them away. If a goose gets shot, 2 will fall out of formation and fall down with it. And those 2 geese will stay with that goose until one of 2 things happens. Until 1, it's nursed to health and they know that it's ready to fly again, or 2, it will die. And once those geese recognize that one of those 2 things is going to happen, they either will set off together with all 3 again, or the 2 will catch up to the old pack. Or if the goose is slower now and it needs help, they will form their own formation of a V until either they need to catch up fast enough or another group of V-formating geese come by that they can join their pack. I never knew that about geese. But what's insane and incredible is how important that is in our relationship with God. How important that is towards us as we help each other. What does it say in Galatians 6, 1 through 2? It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back on the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ." It's so hard to think about how we're supposed to be looking out for each other, right? Because that's not the way the world teaches us. The world teaches us you need to look out for yourself. The world teaches us you need to make sure that you and your own are taken care of first. Make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure you take care of your family. Don't take care of the world. The world's out to get you. The world's a terrible place. And where there is some truth in making sure you take care of yourself, the Bible does, say that, you got to take the speck out of your own eye before you go to somebody else. Like, make sure you deal with your stuff. The Bible also says that, you need to make sure you take care of your family if that's the person, you've been entrusted to your family. But so many times we take those out of context and we think that those are the only things we're supposed to take care of. Or we take those out of context and we say that those are the priorities in life, that those are the things that are the most important. But what we realize when we watch these geese and how they choose to function and how God uses his scriptures to give to us, he says, listen, this is all a team effort. That everybody should be helping everybody. There's no priorities here. That everyone needs help, everybody's hurting, and we all have a role and responsibility to help one another. It says in Romans 15:1, it says, "We who have strong faith should help the weak with their problems. We should not please only ourselves." And so when we think about pleasing ourselves, like I said, it's you guys that have a relationship with God that have this is your calling. This isn't for if you guys are visiting the Crossings Church, this verse is not for you. If you guys are looking at your relationship with God and trying to figure out if you're a Christian, if you're trying to just kind of get an idea of who God is, you're still looking at what that relationship with God looks like, this isn't your verse. But if you believe in God and you call yourself a Christian, this verse is talking about you. Because it says, you who have the strong faith should help the weak with their problems. We shouldn't just sit around and please ourselves. When you guys call yourselves Christians and you guys were baptized and you guys died to self and you said, I'm no longer Jake, I'm dying in that water and I'm coming up, no longer Jake, I'm coming up a disciple of Christ, you literally said, I'm not going to worry about myself anymore. I'm not going to please myself anymore. My role is to please and help others. So how well are you guys doing at that? Have you guys still died to yourself? Do you guys still feel like you are no longer you? Or have you formed like a new identity? Are you like, instead of me being Jake, I'm Christian Jake? I still have the same habits and things that I enjoy, and I'm still pursuing what I wanted to pursue before I was a Christian, but now I just carry that name tag as well, Christian Jake. Or is it all gone? Is your whole life gone, and you're something completely new? And you're something that's helping the weak around you, the hurting world, the lost world that we live in. Where are you at with that? Here's that verse on sheep that I was talking about a second ago. But in Ezekiel 34, 3 through 5, Ezekiel comes in and he talks to some people about the way they're treating their sheep. And he says, you eat the best parts of the sheep dress in the wool, and butcher the finest sheep, yet you don't take care of the sheep. You have not strengthened those that are weak, healed those that were sick, or bandaged those that were injured. You have not brought back those that stayed away, or looked for those that were lost. You've ruled them harshly and violently, so they were scattered because there was no shepherd. When they were scattered, they became food for every wild animal. You see, now if we're thinking about like sheep, like actually physically, because it says that they were ruled harshly and violently, I'm like, well, I guess if you would parallel that to like today, like I'm sure that there are some like kings that in the past that have really ruled their people harshly, right? You could even think about like slavery, like how there were masters and they ruled people very harshly and sternly and things like that. You can look at the physical sense of this where like they probably didn't take care of their sheep physically the way they should. But there's also a spiritual side of this too. Because as shepherds, they were there to take care of the health of the sheep, not just the physical appearance. And for a lot of you guys, you understand that health is much more than your physical appearance, right? There's a mental health that goes on with you. There's a spiritual health that goes on with you. There's an emotional health that goes on with you. And sometimes those things are not met by the world. And this verse is specifically talking, and I believe that what it's talking about is as a challenge to us as leaders. If you call yourself a leader in this church, if you call yourself a leader in the world, if you call yourself an influencer of anyone in your life, and you're not taking care of the sheep, you need to really question if you're actually a leader. You need to really question what kind of leader you are. If you're not going out of your way, not just to lead your small group, to lead a sermon, to lead a cross chat, to lead a guys meeting, to lead your classroom, to lead fill in the blank. If you're just leading in that direction and you've completely neglected the physical, emotional, spiritual side of every little aspect of it, but you just are there because that's your title, you need to really reevaluate who you are because you're going to have to give a response to that to God one day. Listen, leaders, it is your job to invest in the sheep. And that goes much more beyond what you do at a meeting. Much more. Do you have relationships with your sheep? Do you spend time with your sheep? Do you love your sheep? Do you do things that they want to do because you understand that's how you show those things to them? Or do you think that you just got to give them the spiritual side of it and that they're going to be okay? It says that they were scattered because they had no shepherd. And when you guys choose to just be leaders that run meetings, you're telling your sheep that you're not really a shepherd. And they're going to go find somebody else to help them with their emotional stuff. They're going to go find a guy or a girl to help them with their emotional stuff. They're going to find somebody to help them out with their physical stuff, with their spiritual stuff. They're going to go look somewhere else. And what tends to happen more times than not when that happens? Well, what does it say here? When they did scatter, when they did flee because their shepherd wasn't taking care of them the way they were supposed to, they became food for every wild animal. You see, when you're not filling the needs of your sheep, they're going to go look for it somewhere else. And what's going to happen more times than not is the world's going to grab them and chew them up and spit them out. And so there's a huge call here as leaders in the church that you guys got to really evaluate what in the world you are doing to help your sheep. Have you died to self? Have you made it not about you? Have you made sure you love and invest in your sheep so that they can survive? Or are they just going to go out and look for it somewhere else and get chewed up by everything else that the world has to give them? Lastly is a sense of urgency. Our fourth sense is a sense of urgency. I seek to motivate. Once again, if you looked at my Google, it'd be kind of weird because there's so many different weird things about geese that I didn't know about. One of them is, did you know that geese have like 8 to 12 different calls that they can do with their honk sound? There's one of them. That sounded like a baby. Was that a baby or was that somebody trying to be a goose? It sounded like a goose. But yeah, there's 8 to 12 different sounds that a goose will make depending on the context of their situation. You know, there's obviously the mating call that you'd hear a goose make. I don't know these calls, so I'm not going to like try to pretend like I know what they sound like. It'd be weird if I was up here trying to make these weird goose sounds, right? But there's a mating call that comes out. There's a protection, you know, a defensive call that they will have if somebody's walking too close to their nest. There's, you know, an attack call. There's like an injured call. And all these different honks, geese recognize in one another. But there's one specific sound that I did not realize geese had, and it only happens when they're in the V formation. So when they're in the V formation, geese in the back will tend to make a honk sound. And they do it because when the V formation starts to slow down or it starts to tire, there's a recognizing in the V formation that that's what's happening. And so the geese will start to honk to motivate one another, to make sure that they understand, let's not give up. Let's keep going. Let's keep pushing forward. And that's incredible that geese would do that, to make sure while they're in the air that they don't stop. They would keep honking to make sure each other know what's going on. And this idea of urgency is motivating. It's encouragement. It's literally a honk of encouragement to make sure they keep pushing through the hard stuff. In 1 Thessalonians 5:11, it says, "Speak encouraging words to one another. Build up hope so that you'll be all together in this, no one left out, no one left behind." Right? And so just like geese, we need to understand that we have got to encourage one another. We have got to get into each other's lives and let each other know how much we are supporting them, how much we're here for them, how well they're doing in things. We've got to do this, and we've got to keep giving hope, because sometimes this world feels hopeless. Sometimes this world feels lost. Sometimes we feel so discouraged and so beat up in the world that we have nowhere else to go. And what we hear here is that, you know, God wants us to understand you have got to encourage one another to give hope. Hey, man, I know you're going through a hard time, but it's not always going to be like this. You know, like, just keep pushing. You know, God's got some awesome things in store for you, man. Just keep remaining faithful. Like, the world kind of does some crap to us. Let's keep going. He says we've got to encourage each other so that that hope can still be instilled. The most dangerous thing that can happen to a church is when the church gets quiet. You know, we're all like quiet right now, right? I'm not saying like right now, right? But whenever we get quiet with one another throughout the week, it's one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a church. It's when we start all being independents in the world. And we don't depend on one another. We don't give each other encouragement. We don't give each other hope. That's what can happen. In Hebrews 10:25, let us not give up on meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So not only do we need to encourage one another, but we need to do that face to face. We need to be meeting together. We need to be talking with one another. We need to be in the same room with each other. We need to spend time with one another. And the whole point of that, at least part of the point of that, is to encourage one another. Look at your guys' week. You know, look at the last 7 days of your life. How much time have you guys actually invested with people who are encouraging you or that you are encouraging yourself? How many times have you taken advantage of the opportunities of the hangouts that you've had with people to say, hey, man, I'm just glad that you're coming around, or hey, man, I'm just glad that you're here, or hey, I'm just glad that you're my brother, or hey, you know, I'm just glad that we get to spend time with one another. I see you working really hard and you're really trying to change your life, and I think that's awesome. Like, what have you guys done this week to encourage one another? It's not just sending text messages back and forth, right? It's actually physically meeting with one another and spending time with each other that helps the encouragement. And it says, the more, and as you get older, as you see the day approaching, you need to do it even more. It's easy as college kids, right, to spend every stinking night together doing homework, right? Where we say we're doing homework, but we're actually watching Netflix for 12 hours. But we have plenty of free time as we're younger. But as we see the day is approaching, and as we see the days getting older, we start to have a wife or a husband, or we start to have kids, or we start to have responsibilities, and we stop meeting as often. We start making excuses of why our life's so busy. I got work every single day. I got training every single day. I got my kids A, B, and C every single day this week. I can't do anything. I can't make anything. I'll just see you on Sunday. And we lose all of the power of encouragement throughout the week because we make so many excuses because we're adults. But God says, man, do you know what's going to happen if you lose the power of encouragement? Well, Hebrews 3:13 says this, encourage one another daily as long as it's called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. You see, when we stop encouraging one another and we stop being around each other, we stop having presence with one another, sin's still going to show up the way it still does. But when people encourage you and when people empower you and when people surround themselves with you, it's a lot easier to deal with sin. It's a lot easier to fight sin. But when we become independents and we get quiet in the church and we go out back in the world and we do our own things, it's not so easy to get over sin. It's not so easy to fight the hardness that sin puts in our hearts. It's not so easy to fight the thoughts in our heads that we should actually be blaming the church more than using the church to help us. To make a point to have this happen daily, not just together physically, but routinely in our lives, spending time with one another. Once again, I want to have a challenge to you leaders in this room. How well do you encourage the people that you disciple? Do you just create meetings and create hangouts? Or do you actually take the time to pull your sheep aside and encourage them in their lifestyles? One of the biggest things years ago, whenever I was just a random college kid, that really kind of threw me off about church was how much it was organized and how less it was relational. And a lot of you guys that have joined this church to get away from that, right? Some of you guys have been a part of churches that there's no relationships. And I have a fear that if we don't always consistently challenge ourselves as leaders, that we will fall in the same path. It is our role to encourage each other. So you guys as leaders in this room, you need to be making sure that you are encouraging the people that God has entrusted you in a way that they're not independents in the world, so when the sin happens in their lives, they're going to feel hardened by it. But they're actually going to run towards you for healing and for help and for hope versus them trying to deal with it themselves. And so if you know, as a leader, sometimes I like to complain about people in my ministry, and I'm like, man, this person never sees me. This person never reaches out to me. This person never does anything with me. Well, you know what? Maybe you need to look at how much you're encouraging throughout the week. That might be a big indicator as to why you don't have a good relationship with them. And I've been like, man, I am a pretty crappy leader, I guess. Like maybe I probably should check in on them and see how they're doing, or go out and do something with them and just let them know that I'm here for them and I love them and that whatever, A, B, and C. But sometimes as a leader, we have to reflect on those things. And then lastly, Romans 1:12 says, when we get together, I want to encourage you in your faith, but I also want to be encouraged by yours. You see, if you're not a leader, you're not off the hook. Because part of the reason why we choose to encourage one another, it's two-sided. Your leaders, if you're a leader in this room, or if you're looking to be an aspiring leader or you have influence, yes, you have a huge role, and you probably have a more important role in encouraging your flock because you are held to a higher standard because God calls you to that. But that doesn't mean that the rest of us are off the hook. That doesn't mean that we don't have to encourage people. Because let me tell you something. That 20% that I talked about earlier, they get stinking tired. And they get exhausted. And they use their time, they use their money, they use their resources, they use their financial stability, they use all of these things as ways to encourage you. How many of you guys in this room have ever been to somebody's house for dinner? Doesn't even matter whose it is. You've been to somebody else's house for dinner. How many of you guys in this room have ever gotten a car ride from somebody else? Right? How many of you guys have ever got something paid for you, whether you went to like a movie or you went on a trip or whatever it may be? Right? That comes from somewhere, right? Like that's either somebody else's money or that's somebody else's like free time, or that's somebody, like they could be using that to invest in their own families, they could be using that to invest in their own jobs or careers, they could be accelerating in so many different worldly areas, right? But they don't choose to do that. They choose to use those things to help you guys. And what's your response to that? A quick thank you? Man, I'll tell you what, as a leader now in my life, one of the things that helps me the most is when I see a young disciple or a young man that comes into the ministry been completely lost, and he starts to see change in his life. And he comes up and he talks to me, and he says, man, I just love the way that your family functions. I love the life that you have. I want to be like that someday because I see what you have and I think it's great. And I say that not to pat myself on the back because of what I've done, but because I remember 10 or 12 years ago, I said that same exact thing to one of my leaders. Because I didn't have anything. I had no life. I had no dad in my life. I had no reason to grow up. I always thought I was going to be a product of my environment. I thought I was not going to have a good wife, a good kid, a good family. I didn't thought I was going to have financial stability. We grew up really poor. Like, I didn't have anything as a kid. And when I saw that, I encouraged him by saying I wanted to imitate that. And I lived that out. And the first time somebody said that to me years ago, that they loved what they saw in me and they wanted to imitate that, guys, I'm telling you, that was the most encouraging thing that I've ever been told my entire life. That there was something worth value in my life that God had blessed me with because I was faithful to him that somebody else wanted to imitate. And so what I'm telling you guys is you've got to look at your leaders and you've got to encourage them because they're working their butts off to help you guys out. You should want to imitate their faith. You should want to be like them. You shouldn't want to be them, but you should want to be like their faith. That's what the Bible says, right? Be like Christ. Aren't we all striving to be like Christ? So if your leaders are really striving to be like Christ in their position, shouldn't you want to look at them and say, I want to be like what you're trying to be in the world, for your family, for your job, for your context? And for some of the leaders in this room, I know that goes a far way. But I'm telling you, man, we live in this generation where everybody thinks everything should be given to them. And we think that because we're young, people should just disciple us. Because we're young, people should just give us a good relationship with God. And we don't realize that there should be some kind of gratitude or some kind of encouragement that goes along with that. We're supposed to come together to encourage each other's faith. Not to just do this one-sided encouragement and not get anything back. Your leaders need the encouragement in their lives just as much as you do. And so wherever you're at in that, the challenge is still the same. Encourage the world around you. Encourage the leaders they're putting in your life. Leaders, encourage your people. And when we can do this, we can have the common sense of a goose. Didn't think you were going to get that much out of geese, did you? Right? I didn't either. But there's so many truths that come along with this. And the next few weeks we're going to hit on different animals. It's kind of a cool series. Invite your friends too, because we are just kind of taking random animals and figuring out what kind of things are inherently in their nature that can help us as well. So, just look at this. Look at the life of a goose and look at the sense that you guys have, and just kind of figure out what it is in your life that you need to look at to have that same kind of sense. If you guys would, there's a cardstock piece of paper in your guys' communication card. If you guys want to pull that out, it says the Crossings Church on one side, and then on the back side, there's a lot of information that you guys are welcome to fill out. We also started putting envelopes in your guys' communication cards for if you would like to put a tithe or a donation into the offering plate. But what's more important is this communication card. So, like I said, whenever I was a young kid and I looked at my life and I felt like I needed something different, I wanted to be something different, and I saw something in my leader that I wanted to be like, it wasn't just me making that statement. Just like geese, it wasn't just finding the group, but I knew that there was work I was going to have to do. And for some of you guys today, if you want to have that kind of common sense as a goose, you're going to fill this card out today. If you want to have the sense of a goose, you're going to take this thing seriously and you're going to fill this thing out. Because this is your opportunity to not just know that this is a good place for you, but this is a place that you know that you need to assimilate and work in the same spot, in the same place with the same people. And indicate on there what you need help with to keep working towards that same common goal. If there's some kind of addiction or there's some kind of abuse or some kind of neglect that's going on in your life, we have people in our church that help people with that. We have people that will drop down 2 at a time to sit down and look into God's Word with you. They look and find hurting people, and so if that's where you're at, maybe check you want a personal Bible study, and we'll have 2 people just like those geese fly down and spend some time with you to kind of help you out and figure out if it's something that you really want to work for and work towards, and it can pick you up and kind of help you get back on track. If it's just trying to figure out how you want to just be more involved. Maybe check you want to know more about our small groups, because we like I said, that whole encouraging on a daily basis, we take that very seriously here. We spend a lot of time throughout the week. And if you're just looking for more community and more unity throughout the week, maybe check that. If there's just something that you want to pray about, write that out on the side. We have people that are prayer warriors in our church. They take these things seriously and look at your guys' cards, and they pray privately throughout the week for those things to figure out what they can do to help you. But guys, like I said, I really do hope that you guys will take this seriously. The common sense of a goose sounds silly out loud, but internally, God gave them that sense for a reason, and I think he gave it for them for a reason to give us a lesson on what we need to have common sense in as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a prayer, and then I'm going to give you guys some time to fill out the communication card as we sing a slower song, and then we're going to sing a faster song, and that's when we're going to pass our baskets. And if you guys would like, please drop that card in there. Please drop that card in there with any information that you have that you'd like to get help with or you'd like to get more connected with, and we'll make sure we get you connected with those kind of people. And that's also going to be a time that we're going to pass the baskets for contribution. And we put those envelopes in there for if you'd like those. But like I said, guys, if you're visiting here, if you're a guest here at our church, and this is just something you're kind of investigating, I don't want you to put any money in that basket. I don't expect you to put any money in that basket. Because the reason that we got you here at this church, or somebody invited you to this church, was not to get your money. In fact, we got you here to give you something instead. And that's an opportunity and a chance to find a family that's going to function and help you with your life. So I'm going to say a prayer, the worship's going to come up, and then we're going to kind of wrap it up for today. All right? God, I just want to thank you so much for just giving us examples of different things here on earth. The common sense of a goose is something that I would never thought I'd ever be preaching on. But God, it's amazing. Everything you created has a purpose for us. Everything that you put on this earth has a lesson for us. And if we look hard enough and we look intently enough, we can find so many parallels in the creations that you've put on this earth and how we were supposed to assimilate just like they are. And God, just like a goose, there's so many different things that they do that's just inherently wired in their DNA. And God, I just pray for that today for myself, just to be able to be wired that same way. But God, just for so many people in this world, that they've been trying to do it their own way. They've been trying to do it in a selfish way. They've been trying to do it in a way that they just don't know is supposed to be their way. And God, please just help them understand that there's a way that looks so in our nature wrong, but so spiritually right. And so thank you again for your son. Thank you again for this community, this flock that we get to live life with together. And I pray all this in your son's name. Amen.